In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Friday, the 31st of July, year of our Lord 2026. Well, today we're going to be talking to an author who has run for Congress. He has seen how calcified, how corrupt, how resistant to change the system is. The question is, when this rotten system that is ripe for collapses, how do we restore the republic? We're going to be talking about that. And we're going to take a look at a very dangerous vulnerability that may be in your car, exposing you to not only car theft, but theft of items in your car, as well as personal assault. It may even cause an accident. Millions of cars have this installed without the owner's knowledge or approval. Your car might be one of them. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, I found it interesting that I found at least one person who had the same take on these show trials as I do, and that is Brian Schulhavy of Health Impact News. Yesterday afternoon, he put up an article, Republicans are trying to blame Fauci for Trump's COVID war crimes. And again, the only person I've seen that has had this perspective. You know, we've got the Senate, Democrats and Republicans. What they remind me of is, remember this old Looney Tunes cartoon? You got Ralph the Wolf and Sam the Sheepdog.
Morning, Sam.
They're so civil partners in all this stuff.
Morning, Ralph. Morning, Sam.
And then they fight tooth and nail through the rest of it. But, you know, that's exactly what the Republicans do. It's like, you know, the Republicans and Democrats, it's like, oh, how's it going? You know, we got this great club here, don't we? Let's not really mess this thing up. And so Brian says that Rand Paul is pro-Big Pharma, his dog and pony show in Congress today, attacking Fauci based on a false China lab leak narrative is pure BS, all designed to take attention away from the real criminal of COVID, which was Donald Trump, who launched Operation Warp Speed, who destroyed businesses, who forced the FDA to approve an experimental COVID shot that killed millions. And I'll add one more thing. He bragged about it. And as I said all throughout this thing, I said it in 2020. I said, Truman said, the buck stops here. Remember the famous thing he put on his desk? The buck stops here. I'm responsible for all these people underneath me. But not Trump, no. But even more so, it is a tactic now that has become common with both Democrat and Republican politicians everywhere, but especially in Washington. The bucks start there. The financing of all this, the incentivization of all this began with Trump. He was responsible for the people who work for him. Now, Trump comes out and says, well, you know, I never was a fan of this guy. Well, you gave him a medal. You didn't fire him. How many people has he fired? He points out Rand Paul got caught in 2021 for failing to report that he and his wife bought stock in a company that produces COVID drug remdesivir, that'd be Gilead Pharmaceutical, another deadly drug, saying that he forgot to report it. Yeah, right. So he said, I produced a video about this in 2022. So it shows that Republican politicians were all pro-vaccine, all in favor of Operation Warp Speed and getting as many Americans vaccinated with Trump's experimental jabs as they could. They were all complicit with war crimes against Americans. Every one of them should be tried for treason during the war on COVID under Operation Warp Speed, the deadliest war America has ever fought, with the most casualties resulting in the American public with millions left dead or crippled for life. As a matter of fact, Lance was just telling me before we started here, he saw a meme. Tell people the meme that you saw.
Yeah, I believe it was from the Babylon Bee, where it was a man whose mother died in a hospital ventilator or something, is glad to see Fauci get a stern talking to.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. All the not and here's the thing: not even all the appropriate people have been talked to. Right, that old canard that is out there. They haven't even talked to all the people who need to be talked to about this. Not even getting a stern warning. Fauci is a criminal as well, but most of his crimes were committed long before COVID, with HIV and AIDS research, where he and his cohorts, like Bill Gates, used foster children to experiment on. And oh, by the way, and it goes back to the 1986 pharmaceutical legal immunity stuff, the childhood vaccine schedule, all the kids that he killed with SIDS, all the kids that he's crippled and families that he has harmed with autism. It's a long, long rap sheet. Fauci is pure evil, but he didn't create or help to create a false, fake virus in a lab, because the COVID virus does not exist, folks. Let's get that clear, okay? It's not the monster in the room. It's not the gain of function. It doesn't exist. And neither does the HIV virus. It is all fake. Absolutely. And I will stake my reputation on that. Trump was everything but, he did everything except the mandates, right? He did all the lockdowns. He did all the masks. He did all the 6-foot nonsense. And he paid people to do it. And let me take it this way. If you still think that it's gain of function stuff, I talked about this at the time as well. All that stuff was, all the accidents and everything were exposed by Allison Young. It was a series of articles she did for USA Today. And on the basis of that, in 2014, the Obama administration stopped gain of function. And yet you had Francis Collins and Fauci continued to do it. They did it in several different places. And then when they produced their papers, the people who were in the, I guess you call it the trade or whatever, people in the industry, looked at it and said, you were supposed to stop that. How did you do that? Well, they just ignored what the government said to do. They did their own agenda, spending the money as they pleased. And then it got restarted in 2017. Let me see, who was president in 2017? One of the first things that happened in the Trump administration was to restart gain of function. So that horse isn't one you can ride, folks. And that dog doesn't hunt. If you want to say it's gain of function, you're stuck there as well. We keep coming back to the fact that Trump was responsible. No doubt about it. And when you talk about these horrific vaccines, all the damage that they did, and the fact he says, well, everybody died under Biden. Well, that's because Biden was forcing your shot. It was your shot that killed him. And now he and RFK Jr. just approved another $1.25 billion for these shots. How convenient that they don't tell us that until just before this show trial. Now everybody is talking about Fauci, not about Trump, not about RFK Jr., and not about Rand Paul either. So again, Trump says, I inherited Fauci, never been a fan. Well, I think you were a fan when you gave him the platform, when you gave him the power, when you gave him the medal as one of the final things you did as president in your first term. He said, I went the Federalist way, which is basically let the governors decide. And generally speaking, the Republican governors did very well. Oh, he learned this, I guess, from some of these MAGA influencers. Yeah, it was the Republican governors were great. The Democrat governors were bad. No, absolute liar. He paid them all. And some of the worst governors were Republicans. Take a look at Brad Little, Mike DeWine, Brad Little in Idaho, Mike DeWine in Ohio. We've seen this over and over again. I've talked about this till I'm blue in the face. And yet, as he says that, well, it was the Republicans were fine. The Democrats were the ones that were bad. And Deborah Birx, Dr. Scarf, puts it all in context for us. She said some of these states kept very tight COVID restrictions just to hurt Trump. Think about that. Malicious compliance. They wanted to make Trump look bad, so they followed his rules and they took his money. Yeah, she caught Trump in a lie, really, because she's trying to defend him, but she's contradicting him. He says, I went the Federalist way, and these people just did what they wanted to. No, she says, the ones who really wanted to make Trump look bad followed Fauci's orders and my orders, because she was there as well. Birx was the coordinator of the White House coronavirus task force under Trump. She claimed some states kept tight COVID restrictions in place in 2020 because it was an election year. She's not even saying that this was something that went on with Biden to make him look bad. No, this was all under Trump. She went on CBS's Takeout with Major Garrett on Wednesday. She said it was said today many times by Republicans or implied that Dr. Fauci was a villain or a monster or someone who has some reckoning coming to because of all the mistakes that he made, and he foisted upon the American public. Well, that was not her. That was actually Garrett who said that. So I'd like your evaluation of that line of criticism. Now, Dr. Birx said, I think all of us need to be quite honest with ourselves about how not only the information evolved, but the needs for the relevant, what we call countermeasures, should have also evolved, she said. Okay, so we got a virus that is evolving from bats and bat soup, or we have rules that evolved. But nobody's bad. Nobody designed this. Let me tell you, it was all designed. There's no evolution coming on here. It was all by design.
Even this guy is trying to play it down. People think Fauci deserves a reckoning for the mistakes he made. No, it wasn't mistakes.
Yeah. It wasn't a mistake. It was planned. It was practiced. It was calculated. They did it over and over again. The vax, by the way, and I mentioned this when it all happened. I said, isn't it interesting? They've gone out and they have done focus groups and they've had control groups. They try the propaganda on one group and they ask the other group to do things that they haven't propagandized them for, just to see how effective the propaganda is. They didn't do that with the vaccine itself. They did that with the propaganda. They actually did a scientific test. That was what Yale did when they came up with these different things and said, well, you can try this thing that this is the way you love your neighbor. And we had pastors who were selling that lie to people. Or just think how bad you're going to feel if you pass it on to somebody because you didn't get the vaccine. It's like, well, that's a non sequitur. But that's the same kind of lie. And we saw these talking points used by pastors. We saw them used by politicians. We saw them used by everybody. And they'd focus group tested that. They didn't test the vaccine. Well, actually, I think they did. I think they did it before they rolled it out. I don't even think that they did that without knowing that it was dangerous.
Yeah, the people calling for Fauci to have some sort of reckoning aren't doing it for the mistakes he made. It's for the crimes he committed. That's the terms you're looking for.
That's right. And then here it is, folks. This is what she continues to talk about this. She said, we should have a dialogue now about how we're going to do this next time. Next time? We're not going to do this next time. We're not going to have this kind of discussion. That's why they're ramping up the controls, folks. That's why they're putting in the flock cameras everywhere that can identify you and your car and all the rest of this stuff. They're ramping up the control structure because they know that we're not going to comply with this. So they're going to ramp up the force that they can apply to us. She said, we need to get that down in real concrete terms. You know what we're going to do the next time. And we got to have both the right and the left agree that that is the best way forward. Well,
yeah, we need a new lockstep program.
That's right. What about the Constitution? What about informed consent? Would those be anything that would be a possibility? And you've got some Fox News and former employees who were fired because they didn't get the jab are now calling out Fox for their hypocrisy about COVID. Now they're all against it, just like Alex Jones, right? Now they're all against what was done in 2020. Oh, that was evil. When they were telling people to get it, they were pushing it for their sponsors, or they were pushing it because they wanted to sell storable food or whatever, like Alex did. As a result of this mandate, COVID-19 testing will no longer be an alternative in vaccination to New York City as of December 27th. That was the person who got fired from Fox News, and she put that out. And of course, the message goes on to say this mandate by the mayor prohibits unvaccinated employees from working at Fox New York offices as of December the 27th. To comply with this mandate, we are requesting immediate action be taken by all New York City office-based employees currently working at an office, hybrid, or remote. So all of you go get a vaccine, said Fox News, or you're fired.
Even if you're working remote.
That's right. Even if you're working remote. And I don't know what hybrid is. Maybe that's part remote and partly working in an office. But they were fully compliant. And so when we look at this and we look back at what is on its way, as I said, what Trump is doing is not a repeat of his first term history. But history rhymes, doesn't it? It doesn't exactly repeat. Look at this. Every food crisis in living memory has been a one-shock event. We had the 2008 price spike, was a commodity bubble. Now, how do we do that? Did government have a role in that? Yeah, government had a big role in that. Not only helping to create it, but also standing aside and let it happen. Then the next one, you had the 2020 shortages were, as they put it in this article here from Discern Report, a logistics failure. No, it was Trump throwing a monkey wrench in the supply chain. He did that completely. It wasn't a logistics failure. It wasn't done by COVID. It wasn't done by a virus. It was done by Donald J. Trump. He did that in 2020. Then there was the 2022 grain scare, a war on one exporter's ports. Well, again, when we look at this, it's government coming in again, and now Trump is doing that big time with what is happening with the Strait of Hormuz, and that's the point of this article. We go back and we look at what's going to happen to food. It's not just oil and energy prices, but of course it's the fertilizer. 1/3 of the world's fertilizer goes to the Strait of Hormuz. And we're not going to see that just yet. It takes months for that to show up. When people don't plant as many plants or they don't get as much yield, that shortage and the consequent increases in price take many, many months to show up. So we've not yet seen the effect of that, but it is built in and it is gradually going to work its way out. They call it the fertilizer clock. So it's already running. And so we can expect to see this happening. The World Bank projects energy prices rising about 24% in 2026. That fertilizer will rise about 31%. Fertilizer prices ran 35% higher in the first 5 months of this year than in the same period of last year. So I don't know why they think it's going to go down to 31% if it's already gone up by 35%. They think that somehow this is over. No, it's not over. It's going to be escalating, I believe. It's a time-delayed input. The nitrogen that a farmer in Iowa or in the Punjab could not afford to apply this spring doesn't show up as a problem this spring. It shows up as a thinner harvest 6 to 12 months later. It is a rolling shortage that has been introduced to the system. The UN World Food Program, hardly a den of right-wing preppers, is calling this the most significant disruption to the food supply chain since COVID. Let's see, who was president during COVID? This is why I say we're seeing Donald Trump, the one-man fourth turning, doing it again. He wants to create global problems, global food shortages, global reset, global war, global depression, you name it.
Yeah, it's anything that happens to the global supply chain now, it's all so interconnected that echoes throughout every economy.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, as a matter of fact, this Discern report says Scripture doesn't treat preparation for lean years as faithlessness. As a matter of fact, it treats it as wisdom. Just look at the story of Joseph. And I'll mention that today, as July 31st, this is the very last day for a major sale for Jack Lawson's Civil Defense Manual. It's a great resource of information, a way to help you plan and provide for yourself, a great way to find cheap sources of food that will last as well. And you can find that at Jack Lawson Books. For the month of July, he has reduced it. I think it's something like 45%. I didn't look it up before I got on air, but it's a huge discount. And because the set of books is just under $100, so that's a big savings. It's something like $45 that you save off of it. And today is the last day. It's the end of the month. And he's not going to do this like Alex Jones did it. Alex Jones used to get me so upset. He'd say, tell everybody today's the last day of the sale. And so I was okay, do that. And so there'd be a big rush when people buy stuff. And then he would come back and he'd extend it. And it's like, stop making a liar out of me. Just do what you said that you're going to do. If you're going to have a sale and it's going to end on such and such a day, end it that day instead of constantly telling people, hurry up and buy, and then extending it. That used to bother. It's one of the many things that bothered me working there. Well, I'm going to continue down this in just a second, but I want to, we're going to talk about parents and COVID lockdown and the rest of this stuff. We have, I'm going to do that before I take a break. We've got a lot of parents whose kids were hurt by Fauci's lockdown are being urged to take legal action. Now, I don't know, but I guess you You can't take legal action against, you certainly can't take legal action against pharmaceutical companies for all the stuff that Fauci did for the last 40 years, right? Going back to 1986. But you might be able to sue Fauci. The problem is when it comes to the 1986 vaccine immunity bill that he put through and all the other things that happened to people, we don't have a smoking gun like the diary to show that he knowingly was committing fraud, knowingly lying to people, knowing that he was doing the wrong thing. That's why this is a little bit different. And you may be able to sue him over what he did to your family. It may not be that we have to stop at just a stern talking to. The parents group that's doing this is Moms for Liberty. Now, they're not lawyers. You might want to talk to a lawyer about that. It's a difficult road to hoe, but still, if anybody deserved to be sued, it's him. And he is an attractive target. The guy is loaded with money. When you look at what they're not talking about, always follow the money, right? But they're not following the money. They're not asking the questions, why did he have such a large salary and such a large pension? And what happened to all these royalties? You know, within the NIAID, they had millions of dollars that came in with royalties. They would report the total amount, but they wouldn't tell you who got the royalties. I wonder why that is. Just an oversight, I'm sure. It's like Rand Paul's oversight in terms of reporting the stock trades that he had. So the ramifications of the COVID lockdowns, not only for businesses, but on our families and on our children's development. Well, don't forget, Trump paid the governors, both Democrat and Republican, to do it. But now, as I said, one of the smoking guns with this was the fact that, just like with 9/11, they didn't change the building codes, they didn't change the firefighting procedures. No other building has done that before or since, and they didn't change anything about it. So obviously, they didn't believe that it just collapsed into its footprint based on a fire. And so I said, the same thing is true of this. They haven't done anything about the gain of function. So obviously, they don't think that's an issue, do they? Well, now HHS is saying we're going to have a policy that's going to end funding for the dangerous gain of function research. Think about that. Even if they do that, which I seriously doubt that they will, I think this is just window dressing. But even if they did that, what are they doing? Are they going to ban it? No. They're just not going to fund it anymore. So yeah, the corporations will still be free to do it, just like the government says, well, we're not actually censoring you. We got corporations that are doing that for us. So now they can have the corporations do the gain of function. They just won't pay them directly.
And it is very easy to make bacterial infections much more dangerous with gain of function.
That's right. It is something that should be stopped. And the fact that they did not do anything about this, here we are 6 years on. And why haven't they done anything about that? It was stopped, like I said before Trump got in, he restarted it with all the talk that was there. And Trump is out there saying, well, I thought it came from the Wuhan lab myself way back then. Well, then why didn't you say that we're going to stop gain of function? It's your administration that started it. Your administration did not stop it. And so when you look at Francis Collins and Fauci, they continue to do this even when they were told not to. They were never punished. Is there any teeth in any of this? And even as we look at this, if they believe that this really was a virus that escaped or was deliberately let out, they think that the pandemic is real, why would they deny any alternative treatments to people? Well, that was a big tell as well, wasn't it? Because that had been the plan from the very beginning. The plan from the very beginning was to lock everybody down until you got a vaccine. End of story. There wasn't anything about looking for any alternative treatments out there. No. That was not going to be allowed. They were following that plan, dark winter, that they practiced every year since 2 months before 9/11. That's why we are where we are right now. So they're going to perhaps restrict federal funding. This is one of those things, they may talk about it and they may never do it. Who knows? But even if that were what they did, that would not be enough. It's kind of like in Florida where they stopped recommending the vaccine, but they didn't stop the vaccine. It should have been banned. It's a hazardous, dangerous substance, and it should never be allowed. They said, today we're ending federal support for dangerous gain-of-function research. We'll see. We'll see if that's really going to be the case. Well, before I go any further, with it being the end of the month, and I wanted to let people know these are the supporters that have sent in money to us via Cash App, and Zelle, I should say Zelle, Zelle, as of last night. Now, this is when we're recording it. We're not live, by the way. Just want to let you know that we recorded this Thursday night. We've got the recorded interview. So if you're trying to talk to us on Rumble, we won't see it there, but we do appreciate you being there. Francisco C., Daniel F., Jacob K., George W., Lambert W., and Nathaniel C. on Cash App. Thank you so much for your support. And on Zelle, we got a few more people here. Scott L., Felicia H., Matthew M., Brandon M., Susan L., Lois I. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And Kelly K., and Lisa K., and Susan L., and Ronald H. And I think we got a couple more on this other page here. We have Bobby P., Michelle V., James B., Mary Ellen at freemindfilms.com, and Julie W., Michael P., Charles D., Susan L. again, and Joshua J. Thank you all so much for your support. And again, these are producers, folks. If you're listening and you enjoy the program, there is, the old, the Podfather,
Adam Curry.
Thank you. Yeah, Adam Curry. I should know. I've met Adam. I've talked to him. I've had dinner with him a couple of times. But yeah, Adam Curry says value for value. If you find value for the show, we'd appreciate your support. And I do appreciate the support of those people. And I see the same names coming up time and again. One person there was a new supporter. We said, it's the first time I've sent support, but it won't be the last. So I really do appreciate that. Let's continue on with the news here. In the Trump administration, Todd Blanche's nomination is in big trouble. And his reason says it should have been doomed from the beginning. By haggling over the details of Trump's flagrantly corrupt IRS quote-unquote settlement, dissenting Republican senators give a pass to Blanche's unethical and illegal approval of it. And of course, he's not even talking about the slush fund. He's not even talking about the fact that Todd Blanche is ignoring this pedo ring. You know, it's kind of interesting to me. When we look at Trump's collapsing approval numbers and the people that are getting really upset with him, who have always made excuses for him, always cheered him through thick and thin. And I was talking to Karen about it, and I said, I think there's something that is, when we look at it, what is it that has turned them against him? And you think about it, there's a couple of different things. Of course, the Q narrative was that the Trump administration was out there fighting this elite ring of pedophiles, and they were secretly doing this and taking these people all out. Well, guess what? None of that was true. I said it at the time, and we know none of that was true because we find out that Trump is part of the pedophile ring, and he's not taking it out. He's covering for these people. So that's number one. Number two, I think, is the fact that you've got what's really torqued people off. I couldn't believe how many people were complaining about Trump, saying that he's going to honor Biden's auto pen pardon of Fauci. Now, I don't know if it was an auto pen or not, but they all believe that it was an auto pen. So fine. Most likely it was. But he's going to honor this. And they look at this and they have been told for the longest time, just like the pedophile ring, Biden is the enemy. Everything that does is evil. And everything that happened with COVID, that was all Biden's fault. It wasn't any of it Trump's fault, right? And then they've been told rightfully that Fauci had a hand in all of it. And for Trump to just look the other way, as well as ignore the auto pen stuff, for him to look the other way, they can't imagine it. And I saw this, a comment from a reporter. She worked for OANN, One American News Network, and a couple other networks like that. And she put out, she said, I just got this. She was a Washington correspondent. So she said, I just got this from my sources. The reason that he did this, folks, here's an excuse for him. We don't want people to get too upset with Trump because that's where her bread is buttered, right? And so she says, here's what happened. He wants to make sure that the Democrats honor the pardons that he puts out there. So he's going to honor this. It's like, you don't think it has anything to do with who he works for and the fact that both of them work for the same people? You don't think that it has anything to do with the fact that all of Fauci's crimes are also Trump's crimes? And yes, the people in the Trump regime have committed war crimes, corruption, theft, influence scandals, all the rest of the stuff. They've got a long rap sheet that's just waiting for somebody to apply it to them. And he wants to go through and do a blank pardon for them. So that is a part of it. But just understand that he also does not want to have this conversation about who is really to blame. And Fauci knows. Fauci knows what Trump knew and what he did. And he knows where the bodies are buried. So I think all of that has a part in all of this. But the Department of Justice is out there now. We look at some of his some of the things that Trump has been caught on already, just to show you just how bad Todd Blanche is. Even as he is trying to get confirmed in the Senate, he is asking the Supreme Court to review this $83 million verdict that Trump had to pay E. Jean Carroll. Now, remember, first he lost the civil lawsuit, and it was about $5 million, and he's been forced to pay that. He exhausted all of his appeals, exhausted him through the Supreme Court and so forth. And then he started hectoring her because he was angry about the fact that he lost that lawsuit. So he made a lot of defamatory statements against her. And then they went back and did another lawsuit about defamation. And that time he got hit with $83 million. And so what the Department of Justice is arguing is that the taxpayer ought to pay that, not Trump. What do you think about that? Isn't that amazing? So Trump, supposedly because he was president, him making defamatory statements about E. Jean Carroll, somebody who just had defeated him in a civil lawsuit, that was all part of the job. And in a sense, it really is part of the job as Trump does it. Because how does he run the office of the presidency? He does it by defamatory statements and lies. That's the way that he runs it. So it's kind of hard to distinguish his normal operations from what was happening in that. But they're saying that because he was asked that question while he was president, he was responding to people asking him the question, well, then he can be as defamatory as he wishes. And he's not responsible. The taxpayers are responsible for what he had to say.
So if this is all just part of being the president, does that mean that Trump is going to pay back some of the money into the treasury that he's made from all the insider trading as a president?
No, he won't. No, that's what the pardon is that he's trying to make sure that's preserved there. Yeah, the presidential pardon, that's one of the most powerful things out there. And I'm certainly going to need to have that. I need that eraser. I'm going to need that pretty soon. So they're trying to claim that there is the Federal Westfall Act shields federal employees from personal liability for common law tort lawsuits that arise from their government employment. This had nothing to do with Trump being president. It had everything to do with him being a sleazebag and a slime ball. And we all know that happened many decades before he became president. The $83 million verdict arose from statements he made in mid-2019 while he was president, in which he denied her allegations that he sexually assaulted her in the mid-1990s. He denied the claim in an official White House statement. Well, there you go. It made it official, right? So now you and I need to pay for it. Again, while speaking to reporters and statements the jury found to be defamatory. In 2020, then Attorney General William Barr, and of course, William Barr is a guy whose father had deep connections to Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein's worked for his father was the headmaster at a very elite private school. Jeffrey Epstein was a teacher there, and he helped him to get a start on Wall Street and other places like that. And then Bill Barr is the one who got Epstein into prison the second time. And so Bill Barr is the one who came up with this novel idea to start with. And then when Biden came in, they set that aside. They did not pursue that with the Department of Justice. So, when you look at this, making defamatory statements is not something that is part of your government employment. Now, if you see yourself as king, it is a royal prerogative to say whatever you want to about people and get away with it. And I guess that's the way that Trump sees himself, and it's the way that Todd Blanche sees him as well. He's a king who can do whatever he wishes. If the United States replaces Trump as the defendant, Carroll's defamation claim would almost certainly fail. Even though the defamatory lies were essential to Trump, they still aren't his official presidential duties. Does he have a duty to lie? They swear an oath to the Constitution. They don't swear they'll lie and defame people so they can keep their power. Trump may have to pay $100 million in damages and interest for issuing a press release, said his lawyers, and answering reporters' questions. Well, You don't think that you can tell the truth in a press release? I know it's a novel concept for the Trump regime, but it has been done. And even if you disagree with somebody, you can say it in a civil, non-defamatory way. There was absolutely no reason that because he was asked questions by reporters that he had to do it in a defamatory way. So he's lost in the Supreme Court with the initial lawsuit from her. It's unclear whether the Supreme Court will take up these two new petitions that are there or not. Meanwhile, he is facing one of the most brutal weeks in terms of his political career and polls that he's ever had. 3 different polls have found him at between 32 to 34% approval rating, and continually dropping in all of these polls. And of course, the Iran war is a big part of it. And I want to play for you something else that Robert Pape said, the guy who wrote the book Bombing to Win. As I said the other day, I played the clip for you, and he said, well, I would give it about a 70% chance that we are going to have ground troops in Iran. And of course, here's the reason we're going to have ground troops in Iran. It's because of Trump's not geopolitics, but because of his ego politics.
We haven't won the first victory yet, let alone taken on this massive problem of scale. And I believe that we're in the most wicked escalation trap. President Trump is trapped. The trap part is a political trap. He is trying to reverse a defeat. He's trying to reverse it because if he does it, this will be the end of his presidency, and he will be the lamest of lame ducks going forward for years. So this is the trap of the escalation trap. We are likely going to escalate further.
That's right. And so he has to save face. He has to try to make himself more popular. He has to try to look like he's winning. The reality is that when you look at the economic aspects of this, that's bad enough. I mean, people vote their pocketbooks. No, it's the economy, stupid. And yet, this also carries, because of the evolving technology of war, this also carries a possibility that there may be actually attacks and deaths here in America because he keeps escalating this war so foolishly. But the economic collapse would definitely take him out. The other one might actually get people to foolishly fall in line behind him. So they may wind up doing a false flag attack. That's been the calculation of a lot of people. You can see that happening in Iran, for example. When attacked by an outside force, everybody falls in line behind whoever the leadership is. Even if they're the Ayatollah, even if they're Trump, I think that would happen. So you got 34% of voters approve of Trump's handling of the economy, which is astounding that you would have 34%, that a third of the people... What are they doing?
Yeah, this inflation, it's all fine. I love what's happening in Hormuz.
Yeah, look at the gas prices, look at the prices of food and the groceries. None of that's a problem, right? 71% of voters describe the economy as either not good or poor, and 59% think that it is getting worse. So again, that's another inconsistent thing. How can you have 34% of the voters approve when 71% of them think the economy is not good? 49% say they are worse off financially than they were a year ago. 54% said they blamed Trump a lot for the recent rise in gas prices. So how does he get to the point where he's got even 34% of the people who approve for him? I really don't understand. But we'll see, because that works out to be over 100%.
It's all the MAGA people that are just with Trump 100% regardless of what happens, because they've seen the media going after him to such an absurd degree on the left for even things that they shouldn't have focused on. They should have focused on the actual problems of Trump, but they created all this divided, dichotomy where if you aren't for Trump, then you are against America.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, when you look at the attacks from Alvin Bragg in New York and other places, they basically got the presidency for Donald Trump, because people looked at that and they said, well, that's nonsense. And he's being attacked personally, and he got the sympathy of people, and this is corrupt and we need to do something about it. He's become even worse than the partisan attacks and lawfare that we saw from the left. But he didn't have to have any debates with anybody. There were some strong candidates that were running, but he didn't have to even debate any of them. He skipped all of that. And the final touch was this fake assassination attempt. And his ear looks perfectly fine, folks. Ears do not grow back except in the fantasy world of MAGA. And then they do grow back. Well, let's take a look. Of course, we have Generalissimo Franco is still dead. And we have Mitch McConnell is supposedly still alive. But people are putting up some posters as a satire. Take a look at this. This is, there's missing person posters that are going up in Kentucky on polls. Have you seen this guy? Next, they'll put him on a milk carton, right? Mitch is missing. If you've seen this person, let us know. And I guess maybe it was the governor who did that, because the governor has been pretty weak. I mean, when we look at this and what is happening, it's almost like that cartoon I showed you where you got Sam the sheepdog and Ralph the wolf. They kind of work together, don't they? So we're told now that Mitch McConnell is in rehab. But even though he's in rehab and he's working really hard, according to the release from his staff, he still can't talk on the phone. I guess he's out of breath from all the rehab. But he still can't see him, and the governor can't go to see him. And the Democrat governor doesn't want to push any of this stuff. And by the way, the deadline, they've got to hold out to keep Bernie over the weekend, and then they're home free, because there's not going to be an election if he doesn't show up by Monday, this coming Monday, August the 3rd. And so it's been quite a while that this has been going on. Now, here's the narrative from Newsweek based on what the staff told them. And they just go with exactly what the staff, no skepticism, no questioning about any of this. The staff told him that this happened after a fall, and he has, quote, a mild case of pneumonia, unquote. No, what we were told at the very beginning was he was found unconscious, and there was a cardiac issue with that. And as Handy pointed out, he said he's had decades of experiences, EMS. He said when that happens, typically the person does not make it back. And everybody was talking about that for the next week. Handy was the first one that I saw who mentioned that. But a lot of people understood that. They said, yeah, if you were discovered in the morning unconscious and it's been a cardiac event, then the chances are that you didn't make it, or they're going to keep you alive on a ventilator, but you may be brain dead at that point in time, because who knows when the actual heart attack happened. He's only found when the rest of the household wakes up. And so they're now changing it and spinning it, saying that he had a fall and he's now got pneumonia. And this is the message coming from his staff. I'm still working hard to get back on my full schedule in the Senate and in Kentucky, keeping up with intense physical therapy per my doctor's orders, said McConnell in a statement released by his office. And Newsweek reports this with a straight face. Now, I'm not laughing at the condition that Mitch McConnell is in. I'm not a supporter of Mitch McConnell. I typically didn't agree with him on anything, but this is a common thing that we all are going to face, and have sympathy for his family. And yet I do not have sympathy for the politics and the lies that are being put out there by all these people. And it is an absolute lie, I believe. There's no way that if he is really in rehab that he can't pick up the phone and say something to a reporter, or they can't have a visit from the governor. But he has canceled all of his events. There is an event that he has attended every year for 40 years. He's not going to be able to make that because he's too busy in rehab, we're told. He was admitted to hospital for treatment following a fall in June and has since been discharged from the hospital and is recovering in a rehab center. Total lie and a new narrative. Since his discharge from the hospital care, he has maintained a strenuous course of physical therapy and rehabilitation, including multiple sessions a day, designed to rebuild strength and reduce the risk of future falls. Well, I don't know, but maybe talking on the phone would be therapeutic, unless he's out of breath from all those continuous, strenuous exercises that he's doing there and physical therapy.
Didn't notice this before. I like that the missing poster has his description as being turtle-like.
I didn't see the small print. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Turtle-like, yeah.
That's pretty accurate.
That's right. So the governor is also very weak about this. He just asked the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, to investigate. Please look into this, right? He's not going to push this, just like Trump's not going to push the stuff with Fauci. It's just a controlled situation. Well, we saw this from John Cleese, and it was a great post that he put out on Twitter, because he made the mistake of supporting the British leader Rupert Lowe and his Restore Party. Now, the Restore Party are the ones who put together the report about the gang rapes that were being done by the Pakistani Muslims and other groups like that. and with the complicity and the assistance of the government in many cases. And it was outrageous. Well, John Cleese put out a post because people started calling him racist for supporting the Restore Party. And I thought it was so good. When I read it, I could just hear John Cleese's voice. So I asked Trump, not Trump, I got Trump on my mind here. I asked Lance to do this in John Cleese's voice. And so here it is. This is what Lance put together. This is John Cleese's voice reading John Cleese's tweet. And you can just hear Basil Fawlty. You can picture Basil Fawlty reading this.
I see I am being ritually insulted for my support of this man. The uneducated call me a racist. I am not a racist. I am a culturalist. I believe that some cultures are better than others. I prefer cultures to do not advocate stoning, pederasty, wife-beating, female genital mutilation, and beheading opponents. Call me old-fashioned.
Yeah, I call him old-fashioned. So he's openly backing the Restore leader that is there. It earlier made it plain that his preference for Lowe, stating that he trusts the MP more than any of the other leaders. I don't know that any of the leaders would be trustworthy, although this guy looks like he's pretty sincere. As Paul Watson points out, he said churches across Britain suffering more than 10 recorded crimes every single day. Theft, arson, vandalism, violence. Cleese observed that labor politicians have become so dependent on Muslim votes that they no longer even pretend to be even-handed. He also noted that the focus on religion in Britain falls almost exclusively on Islam, while more peaceful and spiritual traditions are sidelined. He is asked why school children are not being introduced to Buddhism. Here's where we part ways with John Cleese, because I got to say that our culture and our civilization, which is better, was not based on Buddhism. It was not based on Islam. It was not based on Judaism. It was based on the teachings of Christ, the fundamental teachings of Christ and our relationship to the government based on that. So as Restore Britain is gaining ground significantly because of the focus that they've had on what is being done to the country by the millions of illegals coming in, John Cleese, like other people, are looking at what is happening to their society, and they're saying something has to be done about this. Well, one of the things Lowe recently told Joe Rogan that arriving migrants are placed at the top of the NHS waiting list, their health system, for dental treatment that British citizens cannot access. So it's a two-tier system with the immigrants being given preferential treatment. They shouldn't be given treatment in the first place. First thing you need to do is to stop the welfare magnet. And unfortunately, one of the criticisms that I would make of Lowe is that he says, I want to get them out of here, and I don't care how it happens. Well, you should care how it happens. He could not care less about defending the humanity of third world con men who break into the country. Look, they're criminals, right? But we do have due process, and we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's throw out the bathwater, but keep the baby. What is the baby? The baby is the system of government that recognizes our own humanity and our common humanity. And we extend due process and humane treatment even to criminals, even to murderers. Because if we don't do that, we wind up creating a monster that is going to eat all of us. And that is a government that has no restrictions on it whatsoever. So you better care how it happens. Do it, but do it the right way. Because when you do it the way Trump is doing it, Trump is destroying the motivation for getting rid of these people because of the federal goons that he's created to do this. He's creating a federal police force. And many people are looking at this and understanding what the problem is, but seeing that Trump is creating another problem that is perhaps going to be even greater and even worse, especially when the Democrats get control of it. And so Cleese said that he prefers a culture that doesn't stone people, mutilate girls, or treat women as disposable. He said that's not racism. That is culturalism. And so some cultures produce free speech, scientific inquiry, and equal rights, writes Paul Watson. He said others produce just the opposite. But I got to say that when we talk about, well, it's great religion out there, Buddhism, Buddhism did not produce the kind of culture that we have here. Culture is downstream from religion. And, it's kind of interesting. I like Monty Python's work. I like John Cleese's work. It's always great for a laugh. I love their satire. But they did do their best to mock the Lord Jesus Christ. as did Richard Dawkins. And the two of them, when they look at this, they love the fruit of what Christianity produces, but they don't want the root. And when you look at what is happening in the UK, just like the rest of Europe, it is a cut flower civilization. It was cut off from the root. It's cut off from from what it gave it substance, and it is now dying, and it's been dying for many decades. And now as we look at the petals of the flower falling to the ground, they say, how do we get this back? And what some of them are trying to do is to try to glue those petals back on, but it's a dead thing because the life is in Christ. It is not in Buddha. It is not in Islam. It is not in Judaism. You're not going to find the values that created Western civilization, the values that gave them Britain that they loved. You're not going to find that in these other religions. You're only going to find that in Christ. Well, the other part of this is parents as tyrants. There's a new educational buzzword that is moving beyond DEI. They're talking about adultism, and they're actually making the parents the bad guys. This is part of the Marxist curriculum that they're giving to teachers so they can propagandize the kids to hate their parents. This really is, I think, this has been pulled up by one group, the PragerU, except the reality is that, Prager is a conservative Jew, but we need to understand that where this stuff is coming from is pure Marxism, pure Bolshevik Marxism. And it is coming, all of this critical race theory, DEI stuff, this is coming from liberal Marxist Jews that are putting this stuff through, just like the Bolsheviks were. And that's where this is coming from. There's a lot of conservative Jews that don't want to see this. We need to understand this is part of the liberal Marxist Jews, and it's their agenda. That's where it's coming from.
It's the old it takes a village to raise a child thing. The Marxists have always wanted all children to be raised by the state and not know their parents, so that, or not have, a connection to their parents, destroy that as much as they can to have, good little soldiers of the state.
And that's really what the schools are fundamentally about anyway. I interviewed She Van Fleet about her book, Mao's America. She is the one who really understands what this is all about. She pointed out it wasn't enough not to be racist, but you got to be anti-racist. She said that's exactly what they did with the struggle sessions in Mao's China. And she said, I see the same tactics being done right now here in America. It is Mao's America. But it's also Bolshevism. It was Alexander Solzhenitsyn who said the Bolsheviks were all liberal Marxist Jews. And he said they hated Russians. That's why they did what they did. It wasn't that they were trying to make Russia better. They were trying to punish people with that. So the ethnic studies program is out there calling parents, saying that they're guilty of what they call adultism, trying to portray parenting rules as a form of fascism. But of course, their rules are wonderful and must always be obeyed. This is another hallmark to show you that this is coming from communists, because for communists, everything is fascist, right? You're either a racist or a fascist when they attack you. But they are authoritarian, and there's no question about it. You just can't you can't mention the fact that they're authoritarian, or they come after you. Just like we have seen so many times, critical race theory, DEI, and now a new tactic to come after people. The Bolsheviks always have something new, don't they? Well, we have, we're looking at what is being done to the society in terms of the technology that is there. And I mentioned there is a very big threat out there for your car you may not know about. This is something that, and I'm going to play the report for you and let him explain it to you. But if you've got a sticker on your car that says you've got the KARR alarm system, you better look into this, because there is a very easily hacked device that is attached to that. And even if you did not sign up for this, you still have that device attached. And even if you didn't sign up for it, it can still be attacked. And that's what this report is about. I'm going to play this. This is the KARR alarm hack.
With the press of a button on this homemade Android app, I'm about to hack all of these cars.
This is a car alarm that is installed by dealers.
What is the security issue that you found with it?
All of these systems actually have the same universal key built into them. Now, the issue with that is the system can be used by an attacker to also immobilize your car. And that key is unfortunately on millions of alarms that have been deployed by these dealers. When you're with a dealer and they're trying to negotiate the price, they'll actually say to you, there's also this alarm system. We already put it in your car. Do you want to perhaps pay for this as an upgrade? And then you can have access from your smartphone and you can control your car to unlock, lock, activate the horn from that smartphone app.
And then what happens if I say no?
You can, as the purchaser, say, I do not want this system in my car. They will say, okay, fine. We'll deactivate the system. Even if the system has been deactivated, it is still operating. And whenever the car is turned on, this actually wakes up and the Bluetooth radio turns on, and now you can connect to it as an attacker and remotely control it. Here's the sticker right here. If you have this sticker that says KARR, you likely are vulnerable to this attack.
I did not pay for this, but as it turns out, with just a button click, I can activate it as long as it's parked just a few minutes ago.
Or if the car is on and driving, right?
Yes.
So can you show us?
Sure. So right now, I'm going to convert it from this deactivated state into an active state.
So that little honk was the only sign you're going to get that your car just became vulnerable?
Yes, just the honk. Now I can lock the car. Go ahead, try to see if you can unlock it. And as it turns out, we can also unlock the car.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So now you can honk the horn, for instance. And you can also turn on and off the lights. So as it turns out, we can also immobilize the car. So you can sit in, try to switch on the ignition, and it's not going to work.
It's not starting.
At this point, you would need to actually tow the car if you want to drive it again, because the person that owns it has no idea why their car won't even start anymore.
So you can basically paralyze any car that's in Bluetooth range of your phone.
Exactly.
Aaron's team estimates that more than 2 million cars nationwide have the car system installed. They got that number by studying data from Wiggle, a crowdsourced app where users known as Wigglers compete to log Wi-Fi and Bluetooth signals they pick up with radio antenna. Aaron's team then used the serial numbers of the devices in Wiggle with the car's signature to extrapolate how many of these systems may be out there. But Wiggle also collects location data tied to all those radio signals too, right?
Yes.
And so does that mean that you can track someone's location based on these car alarm radio signals also?
Oh yes, totally. Now the problem with that is if you get that data, the serial number does not change. So you can track where someone lives, where someone works.
Somebody wouldn't even need to follow you back to your home or to where you park the car. They could just find that same radio signature on Wiggle.
As part of our research, we investigated in the Wiggle database how many cars were actually targetable. And we noticed that there are quite a lot of cars where we see them stationary, and that means likely they will be seen again and again at the same location. It could be the case that someone could use those public databases to target individuals that have that vulnerable vehicle.
88, 89. Oh, we have 90 right now.
I just want to note that we only drove around here for about 20 minutes. We stayed right next to the university's campus. We almost saw 100 cars that are vulnerable.
Right, so let's say we want to target this vulnerable car up here. All I have to do is we pull up behind it. I'm gonna activate. You heard the beep, it's active. This is a particularly scary idea. I've unlocked because a carjacker could remotely unlock the door at a stoplight, then drag the occupant from the front seat or steal something from inside the car.
So there's actually a tool that car thieves commonly use that's originally actually a tool for locksmiths. What it essentially does is let them clone the key of the car. Normally, the car thieves have to connect it inside the car, and to get in there, they're smashing windows. But with this alarm, when you bypass it, you can get in the car silently, plug this thing in, and you'll be able to steal the car.
So it was actually more than 18 months ago that you first told Aperture Protection Group about this discovery. Did they leave this vulnerable all that time?
They've been developing a patch. Everyone that has this in their car, including people that don't even know they have it because they said no to having the system installed, now needs to run a firmware update from their phone onto this device in order to patch this universal key that's on there. Doing that kind of massive update is going to require a huge awareness campaign. I want as much media attention as possible onto this because in the end, there is no other way we can reach the millions of people than to just make it widely known this is happening and get them to install that patch on their car.
And again, that is a report from Wired.com, part of their Wired investigations. This was the type of thing They used to drive Goat Tree crazy. He worked in cybersecurity trying to find exploits for people. And they would hire him to find these problems, and then he'd tell them about it, and then they wouldn't fix it. That's why he was always, first thing he would look at was it an inside job? Was this an exploit that I found for them? And then they wound up not fixing it and perhaps used it themselves. But this is technology gone wild, isn't it? It's geospatial intelligence for private criminals instead of the government criminals that are out there. And notice all the things that can be done, how simple it is to do this type of thing. The government is putting vulnerabilities in our life everywhere, and they have a design behind that. This is just really a series of stupid events and an ability for people to get into this thing. Wasn't planned to do it that way, but the government planned to do it that way. Yes, Lance?
Yeah, it was the passcode for all of them was the same. And it took them 18 months to create a patch that will change your passcode so that you can't get in with this universal key. Mm-hmm. And even if you do that, you've still got this thing that's broadcasting a unique identifier of wherever you go that is available publicly on Wiggle to anyone that cares to look what your schedule is.
That's right. There's a geospatial intelligence aspect to it. The other part of it where they have the same password, we have seen that over and over again, and Goat Tree's talked about that as well. You see it when you have these signs that are put up by the on the highway by the state, and it'll say something like, warning, raptors ahead, or zombie apocalypse ahead, or something like that. That's because they put these things out, they all ship with a default password, and nobody changes the password typically. So you got a lot of people who know how the device works. They go there and it's like, nobody changed this password. And that's what's happening with this, because the people didn't buy the system, but the dealer installed it. It still got the default password that's there. The other thing Goat Tree said was you typically will find a situation for the railroads. He said they're really bad situations, infrastructure situations like that. Typically, people don't want to have to track the password, and they've got a lot of different people that might be working that position. So what they'll do is they'll write the password up on the wall right above the the device, leaving it vulnerable for somebody to come in and switch the track and create a derailment or something like that. So this type of stuff, the more complicated our infrastructure becomes, the more vulnerable it becomes. And so just make sure that you're taking the appropriate precautions. I'll just remind you again, today is the last day to get a big sale on civildefensemanual.com. You'll find it at jacklawsonbooks.com. I'm sorry, he changed his website. But you can find it at jacklawsonbooks.com. You can find the Civil Defense Manual that he has there, and it's on a big sale this month. I'll also mention before we go, don't forget to prepare financially for the things that Trump is setting up down the road. And there's many of these chickens that are going to be coming home to roost. And there's a way that you can prepare for this kind of economic catastrophe that is kind of baked into the policies that we've had the last few years. And that is to try to set aside at least some of your money into gold and silver that's under your physical possession. And you can do that at davidknight.gold. It'll take you to Tony Arterburn at Wise Wolf. Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back with an interview talking about what happens after the collapse. How can we recover and revive our republic? I don't know if it can happen before the collapse, but we need to get the word out for what we want to build, because it is going to have to be rebuilt at some point in time. And hopefully we'll be the ones rebuilding it and not the bad guys. Thank you for joining us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Joining us now is a man who has spent time in the military, in the Navy, and he has spent time trying to run for Congress as well, and he is still pushing to revive our republic, and that's the name of his book, Reviving Our Republic. He has a website, revivingourrepublic.com. He has a podcast as well as an app that is in development. And I wish him luck because, as we were just talking about, this republic is dead. We beat this dead horse on a regular basis just to point out where it needs to go. But it's important to take a look at this from a systematic point of view. And of course, thank you for joining us, Mike Biedenbaugh. Thank you. And the book again is Reviving Our Republic, 95 Theses for the Future of America. As we said just before this interview started, I asked you, I said, is that a reference to Martin Luther?
Yes, it is, David. Thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, like I told you, if a little monk in a German village was willing to risk being burned at the stake, I'd be willing to risk whatever the parties throw at me, trying to put this thing out and try to share the good news so that we can fix this mess we're in.
Well, thank you. I think what they're burning at the stake is the Constitution. They put a stake through its heart and they set the thing on fire. That's what is happening here.
They're using it for kindling.
Yeah, that's right. Where do we start with all this? I mean, it is a target-rich environment, all the things that are wrong with our government. And I like the way you structured the book because you go through, we have to understand how we got here. We get to a point where we're in a tangled forest that is on fire and there's like, instead of continuing down this path, how do we find our way back and kind of trace the breadcrumbs back to where we were? Where would you start? And where did you start? You started with partisanship, I believe.
Well, yeah. So let's go back 36,000 foot view of this. I was inspired the structure of Martin Luther's 95 Theses, but the elements of the software, besides the hardware inside it, was based on George Washington's farewell address. I think George Washington was the indispensable man that made this nation possible. And, that's a long story on why I think that is. But when he left office, he gave us a farewell address because he saw, after being in office for 2 terms, where the Constitution didn't really, where the openings and vulnerabilities of self-government was and how the Constitution didn't have enough guardrails. So he mentioned about the warning of false patriotism, of agitated political parties, consolidation of power in political parties, foreign entanglements, and also fiscal responsibility. And those 3 things right there show how we have totally ignored his instruction manual on how to keep this thing in between the rails. Now, I added the more modern perspective of corporate political collusion. Which is what has compromised the ability of people on the ground to have as much effect in our self-government as I think we should. And as most people, I think, understand that we should.
I agree. And if we don't do something about this corporate government collusion, we're going to wind up with a police surveillance state. I mean, that is at the heart of it. It's what we have seen in terms of the censorship for social media and so many other things. But of course, one of the issues that you talk about, and it's one that everybody returns to, term limits. And I thought it was interesting when I ran for Congress 30 years ago. It was right after Newt Gingrich had done his contract with America. He had 10 terms that were there. They enacted all of those except for term limits, if I remember correctly. That was the one that they did not do. I think they did everything else, even the line item veto. But it was Rudy Giuliani who then took them to court over the line item veto and got the Supreme Court to overturn that, surprisingly. But they did not want to have term limits. Once they ran on that, but then once they got in, it's like, no, let's forget about that.
Yeah.
How do we get that type of thing through? That I think is part of the issue. When we look at this, a big part of it, and that's one of the early things that you talk about, is term limits and the fact that they have this separate retirement system and all these perks that are there. There's every incentive for the kind of government that we have right now, isn't there?
Well, it is. And the thing is, the way people are approaching representation now is as if it's a lifetime career. And it was never meant to do that, especially in the House of Representatives. It expected a more professional, connected class in the Senate. But the Senate was never supposed to be elected by the people. It was supposed to represent the state governments.
That's right.
Right. And that's been compromised, which is another thing I think we should have to look at. But term limits alone won't fix anything as long as we still have the revolving door from serving to lobbyists and corporate boards, and then being also for corporations and money to funnel back into lawmaking. And so that's why when I talk to people about this, one or two policies won't fix anything.
That's right.
It takes a full revolution of all these different things, and really it's just taking the traditions we were founded on and elevating them back to show how important they are.
I agree. And, I guess the question is, how do we do that? Because the political parties have become so incredibly powerful. They have a lock on even who is allowed to run, essentially, and who is allowed to be heard. I don't know what the situation is like there in South Carolina where you ran. You told me just before the interview you ran in Lindsey Graham's old district.
Yes, yes, I did. And it is the reddest district here. Now, I consider myself a constitutional conservative. And so I know all the Republican Party groups here, but I know I would not be accepted by them because I don't toe the line of party dogma. And so I knew I had to run as an independent. The person I ran against, which was Donald Trump's second choice to anoint, she was elevated she was elevated through corporate money. She ended up raising $900,000. I didn't have a chance. And here in South Carolina, it's one of 7 states. It was 7 states 2 years ago. I assume it's the same. Where all you got to do is hit R, and you don't have to vote for another thing. You just hit R for Republican or D, and that makes it really hard for independents to gain a track hold here in any federal election.
What about ballot access in South Carolina? In North Carolina, that was a very difficult thing for us to do. I got involved with a third party. I got involved with the Libertarian Party, and it was this task. We compared it to Sisyphus, because you have to roll this thing up, and then you did not retain ballot access unless you got a certain percentage of the vote for either governor or president. And the two that would be the hardest to get there. And then at that point, you start all over again. And the threshold was you had to get 10% of the vote for governor or for president in order to remain on the ballot. Otherwise, each time you go through and have to create a new political party. And they did that, even though we had a candidate who got 4% of the vote. They said that doesn't count. You got to go back and collect signatures equivalent to 2% of the people who voted. And it's like, how does that make any sense? You
got signatures. You had 4% of the people vote for you. So that's they signed off on your signature. I was able to get in through a party, the Alliance Party, which was formed by actually my personal doctor, a good friend of mine. He had run for governor again in the primary against Mark Sanford. And he formed with a leading Democrat in the state, the American Party, trying to create kind of a middle road party that was constitutional. And then they ended up forming with others to form a national alliance party that had ballot access in about 10 states back in 2020. Unfortunately, those other organizations went to the wayside, and now there's only 2 states that have alliance party. The one in Minnesota is very liberal. It's kind of a reform progressive Democrat party. Ours is here in South Carolina, does not have any ideology except systems. What you pledge not to run more than 2 terms and things like that. So that's why I felt very comfortable running under the Alliance Party.
And of course, that is the key. The Republican and Democrat parties, they're the ones who pick the candidates. They run their own primaries and that type of thing. They've got their own rules. It's amazing how much power is concentrated at that point, and they become the gatekeepers, really, for these professional politicians, don't they?
Well, they do. And the thing that I have a problem with the primaries is the parties I see as private groups that want to put forth their agenda, their platform with a representative to represent that party in whatever office it is. And, but they have the state underwriting their primaries as if it's as important an election as the final election.
That's right.
So what we've done, we've created a culture of voters who think the primary is the first part of the election, and it's not. So now we have Republicans and Democrats calling for closing the primaries, meaning you can only be a Republican to vote in a Republican primary. And my response, it sounds logical that if you're in the Republican primary, but my response to that is That's what a convention is.
That's right.
If don't have the state underwriting, don't have our tax dollars going to support your primary if everybody can't vote into it.
That's right.
That's not how it works. So
That's right.
I call on a lot of my Republican friends here to quit calling for a closed primary and just go back to the convention system that they had before.
How do we get past this this blockade, though? I mean, both you and I have run as trying to run outside the two-party system. We hit a brick wall with that. It is so incredibly entrenched, and they have set up a system because they get paid off by so many people. And it's essentially a system where they pay off the media. We've seen this system used by the pharmaceutical companies. They understood how that worked. So they started running commercials. Now they own the different networks because they run so many commercials on them. They're not going to criticize their product. And the same thing is true of the Republicans and the Democrats.
It is. So what it will take is a social upheaval against the chaos that is inevitable to come.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are on the verge of a certain level of social chaos, civic chaos, that really concerns me. It concerns me for my grandchildren being born here. I'm a big student of South Carolina history, and I know enough about our history that when the governmental guardrails and social norms break down, people get hurt.
That's
badly.
Right.
I mean, the revolution in America, we've glorified and romanticized the revolution, especially this last 250th anniversary of the Declaration. But in South Carolina, it was a bloody civil war where brothers were hunting down brothers and killing them. It was chaos in the upcountry of South Carolina, a bloody mess. And then you had what happened leading up to, the Civil War, and then Reconstruction, and then Jim Crow. So we always have a tendency for a certain level of mobism that the checks and balances are supposed to help mitigate. I mean, if you remember, our Constitution was created as a reaction to Shays' Rebellion, a group of people wanting to overthrow the government. And they had to create a more perfect union where the mobs wouldn't take over. And what I see happening now is we're at risk of having mobs taken over again.
Yes.
And when people see that, I'm hoping they'll look for something to rally around. And my book is just me, no hubris. It's just me going, here's my experience. Here's my life. I think this will work. And I'm putting it out there. And I appreciate you giving me time to share it.
Well, and I think that we need to understand, as I pointed out, in your book, you'll say, how did we get here? Well, these are the different steps. This is how this evolved. These are major milestones so people can see where it began and then where it went wrong gradually. And hopefully if we have that perspective, we can learn something from this failure that this government is doing. I agree with you. I think it's going to get very bad. I think what's going to happen, part of it, I think, is going to be the Federal Reserve, because when you look at the way the federal government has assumed power, it's been through a process of bribery and blackmailing with money that was just created out of thin air, the fiat currency. Once that goes, people have become so dependent upon that. That's why this is going to be much worse than the American Revolution was initially, because not only do we have weapons of destruction that are much worse now at this point, but we also have an interconnection here. In other words, it's going to rip the fabric of society apart in a way that is very different than the American Revolution was. We were not that intertwined with Great Britain. People were pretty much independent on their own, and society wasn't that intertwined either. You didn't have this kind of complicated just-in-time delivery system. People were pretty much self-sufficient. They could grow their own food. They had a large amount of independence. Now people just go to the grocery store. If the grocery store gets cut off because of a supply problem, we got big problems, and it's going to get really bad, I think.
One bad sun flare or a wartime microburst in the atmosphere, and there's people that will go back to the Stone Age because we don't have connectivity with these anymore.
That's right.
And just the computers in our cars.
Mm-hmm.
So just to go back a little bit, where all this started, I think, is the slippery slope for great nations, that they always fall into this trap of power and growth. And it's my philosophy that we cannot be a world hegemonic power at the same time of being a nation bounded by liberty of the individual and sovereignty of communities and states in relationship with each other. The type of systems for one is not the same systems for the other. And we have gone into the world hegemonic power, world currency stuff for so long that, and coupled with our wealth, has led to a consumptive society. People just want to consume. As long as they consume and get cheap stuff, they're fine. That's why it's going to lead to a certain breakdown that hopefully will not lead to secession of states or whatever could come about from this. I mean, I could easily see a trajectory where we'll have the nation could potentially break apart. I mean, I could see that happening. I hope not.
I think I think the power is too concentrated to be governable. And, and I think when I look at the types of things that you're talking about, I think you realize that as well. We have seen so much concentration of power. One of the things that you talk about, and of course, that's your thesis 33, you address the fact that we have so few congressional representatives. What we have done is limit the number of congressmen, when in reality, at the very beginning of the Republican, of course, they immediately abandoned the idea that they would limit the number of constituents, right? Have it 30,000 or 50,000 or whatever. They said, well, never mind. Now we have a fixed number of members of Congress, and yet the number of constituents has grown and grown and grown. And so what you're seeing is a consolidation of power within each individual congressman. And that is antithetical to everything the founders wanted. They understood the danger of the concentration of power. We see that in so many different ways, but a lot of people don't see it in the power of an individual congressman. And, now they represent what? I think it was 500,000 people when I ran. Now it's about 700,000.
750-something thousand.
Yeah. And that's insane. It is now. That's insane. That's too much concentration of constituents for a congressman to actually represent those people. And and a lot of the objections, I was talking about this 30 years ago, a lot of the objections I heard were, well, we can't get everybody into one big building. If we have that, if we got several thousand congressmen, we can't get them all into one building. It's like, who said that's necessary anymore, right?
Yeah. I mean, I tell you, there's so much technological revolution of communication, of engagement, that I've worried about that too. When I talk about that, how do we reduce this? Can we reduce this down to 100,000 people? And it will be difficult, but we have to have a goal to figure this out, because I know the way it is now, it is too much detachment of the people from their representative. And it leads the representative to only see their constituents as only those people who either voted for them or has given them the most money or their corporate partners.
That's right.
And we just got to stop it. So if it means
the reality
we have three...
They don't really represent 30,000 or 750,000 people, do they?
No.
They represent a very small group of people who gave them money. Corporations, APAC, and that sort of thing. That's their constituency.
It is. But the thing that concerns me the most on all of this is the culture of representation has changed the terms constituents to mean the people who voted for them and not everybody you represent.
That's right.
You hear people say, well, I have to support my constituents, and they're talking about either the Republicans or Democrats or the base, whoever voted for them. That's not the spirit. So that's the type of educational thing and conversation we have to shift this. And I see a lot of these shifts as being generational. I think they'll work, but it takes the conversations like this and getting out there and saying there is a way through this, but we have to start taking responsibility and to be vigilant over the freedoms we want to maintain.
I agree. Yeah, it has become so entrenched. And even as we watch these things, some of these things, like one of the ones that you address, of course, is the 17th Amendment, which was changing the Constitution to have a direct election of senators. Well, what's wrong with that if we want to have representative republic, right? Well, they were there to represent the power of the states. And as you pointed out, a lot of this stuff really hit the pedal when it was the group of people who had fought the Civil War. They very much did not want to have any power in the states. They wanted to consolidate all power into Washington. And so that was part of that design, wasn't it? But it is set there now in essentially concrete in a constitutional amendment. It's going to be very difficult to undo that. We have other issues.
That will be one of the hardest.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we have other issues that have just kind of evolved, like I refer to it as the Pelosi power lever. The fact that she waged control over the House of Representatives, and then once the Republicans got in, they complained about it. Once they got in, they used the same thing. You had John Boehner and others. You had the revolt that came from people like Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Chip Roy and some others to say, no, we're going to have something that operates more along the lines of a standard parliamentary procedure where we are able to offer amendments from the floor, where we can introduce bills without having to go through the control structure at the top. People look at the control structure that the political parties exercise over the ballot. They exercise that kind of political control over the ballot inside of Congress. I mean, Congress doesn't have any real elections. They've got to restore elections and voting to Congress before you really have any meaningful reform. I mean, they're talking about, well, we gotta manipulate, we gotta do things to make the elections more honest. Well, make the elections in Congress and the votes in Congress more honest. I mean, there's just so many things that they have done. As you point out, I don't really see any way that you're going to break this logjam unless it's going to be a major catastrophe in this country.
Well, it will be a level of catastrophe that will wake people up, and hopefully what I've been doing is sending out my book and trying to get folks to realize, if we can just get 10 or 15 representatives to take this book and take my 95 thesis and go, wow, I want to support this, and create a Federalist caucus or a new Federalist caucus or something like that in the House and Senate, they can control the House and Senate with 15 people. It will be under their control. And that type of fulcrum caucus is the way out of this to try to get the other folks to come alongside. One of the things when we were talking, I wanted to mention one of the things I think is most important, because people talk about Citizens United and all of these decisions that put so much money into corporate hands for our elections. This is another amendment we have to do. We have to differentiate between natural persons, which is what our citizenship is made of, and artificial personas, which are corporations. Because right now, the textualists on the Supreme Court see them as the same because there's no differentiation in the Constitution about it. And we need to differentiate that.
But Mike, Mitt Romney said corporations are people too.
I know. That did not go well. Well, but that's the thing, right? He said that in this thing because that's what the Supreme Court said, but it also shows the misunderstanding of the role of the Supreme Court. They're not the lawmaker. They're the umpire. So if they call a strike, you don't sit here and say, we're tired of hearing about strikes, we need to change the Supreme Court. What does it take to get a better picture? What does it take to set up the rules and to change it? And with that, Citizens United just told me, here's what's decided, here's how we fix it. And I think if it's communicated that amendments can work, I think we'll have a lot of people rallying around them. And that's what I'm hoping this book would do.
Yeah. Well, it certainly is something people need to understand. Your book is focused around American history, around the American solutions and the problems that came to undo those solutions that people like George Washington and Jefferson gave us at the beginning. We turned our backs on that, and this whole thing is going to blow up. My concern, Mike, is that as we look at this, there is a growing acceptance of socialism. And I think that's being driven by this concentration now of not only political power in Washington, but a concentration of wealth. And this is kind of a low information revolt against that. People don't understand what socialism is about. They don't understand what the American republic is about. And they are liable to be moved in that direction. I mean, when we look at what happened to us in 2020, I'm very concerned about the ability of the American public in general to really understand what's going on and to really have a backbone about it.
Well, people that are touting a concept of social welfare and pooling dollars for social benefit is a natural outcome when you have the capital markets pooling all the money at the top. Right. So in my little town here of Prosperity, South Carolina, my grandfather's generation, all the stores in Prosperity supplied all the goods anybody needed within a hour-long buggy ride.
That's right.
Or cars and everything. But what we've had is is a kind of a colonial aspect of large corporations extracting capital out of small towns and pooling it into larger cities and creating franchises. So when I was growing up, people that owned their own stores, their grandchildren now are managers of chains.
That's right. That's right.
You know, and
they've broken the power of the mom and pop, and they've broken the ability to have, that's one of the strengths of America and even of England, that Napoleon criticized them for being a nation of shopkeepers. Well, we don't have that problem anymore, do we? But that was people, you had an opportunity. If you worked hard, you had a ladder that was going to take you up. And you also had that kind of flexibility that was built into the system. Now they have knocked down those ladders, and people don't have that opportunity. We had major destruction of that during 2020. You had the small guys were told you shut down. The big guys were told you can open up. And I know how that looks because I've had a small business as well. I've had a situation where they allowed Walmart to stay open, but they shut us down. And, that really hit a raw nerve with me when it happened to me, and it hit a raw nerve when it happened again in 2020. But that is exactly what we're seeing. But it's even worse than that. In a sense, I look at this as this kind of plantation system that we have now. In the original Constitution, unfortunately, they had slaves as only having a portion of being represented in government for the census. They only represented as a portion of the population. I think that's where we are right now. I think they see us as slaves and serfs. We don't really, they might count us, but we don't really count, not in the ways that they're looking at, as you pointed out before. They're simply looking at their donors that are there. And those are the people, the corporations that are the superpowers, and they're the essentially the overseers or the owners of the various plantations that these people are going to be managing for them. They have not only have they elevated the corporations to the level of equal to persons, but they've made them superior to people. And when you look at it, the theory of American government and the Declaration of Independence is that we have rights because we're created by God. Well, the corporations are created by government. And yet, over and over again, we see, and this is even coming from the libertarian side, we see people saying, well, the corporations can censor you if they want. And I looked at it and I said, well, okay, if they can take away my liberty, if that suits them, then can they take away my life as well? Are they going to be allowed to murder me without the government stepping in and protecting my life if the government's not going to protect my liberty?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, when I had my own business, promotional merchandise and promotions, and I moved from New York back home to Prosperity, and people, they saw me as a business asset, and they wanted me to be on the Chamber of Commerce and on the Economic Development Board. Well, all they had been doing is touting to get big corporations to come to the exit ramp on the freeway near Newberry, South Carolina. And that's what they were looking for.
That's right.
And I told them, I said, if you bring me on there, no, I will push for, instead of aiming for one big company that hires 500 people, I'd rather have 100 citizens that want to hire 5 people. Because that's the type of sustainable economic development that makes a community healthy. And needless to say, they didn't invite me on the board because, and it wasn't malicious. It's just the cultural outlook of big shovel moments, big companies hiring a lot of people. And it's a sad state of affairs that we can't see the brilliance of just mom and pop shops. But I will say there's a lot of hope in the Gen Zs and the 20-year-olds that are out there now have a very entrepreneurial spirit in a lot of these small towns. I see them starting things, and there's opportunity there to tap into that. And I hope we can. But then we have to go into some antitrust things to limit the power of what corporations can do. We have to come to terms with that.
Well, when you're talking about that and the mindset that, well, we want to have these big corporations come in because they're going to create all these jobs and so forth, even if they don't, right? Because we see more often that it's small businesses that create more jobs than big business does. And yet we just saw Donald Trump come out with the data centers talking about, you need to have these things in. If you bring these things into your community, you're going to make a lot of money. It's that same dynamic, that same mindset. And of course, the data centers and the Flock network and all of these surveillance systems that are out there, and what I call the police state military industrial complex, when you look at all of that, That really is based on that kind of idea that big corporations really ought to rule us, and that is really where the prosperity is going to come. It's going to come from government grants coming out of Washington. Do you address that in your book?
Yes, I do. So one of the big things that I saw that really poisoned that corrupted the system of spending, why we have so much debt, is because we have an automatic funnel of money leaving people's pocketbooks before they even see it in their pocketbook, intervening between the employer and their pocketbook, grabbing out tax money. And that automatic funnel of money has created an addictive society of thinking we always have this money coming in. We can just go into spend and spend and spend. And you have a population that likes to see money coming back home. But back before the federal income tax was put into place, the tax burden for the states was here. The feds were here. Now it's done this.
Yeah.
So what is that? What has that created? That's created a population in the states that go to their representatives who gets elected more and more because we can bring money back down here.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And so the states now become subservient to the federal money machine. And that's why elected representatives constantly get reelected. When I ran, and I'm sure you had this happen too, when I ran, every mayor, every town I went into where I met the mayor, the first thing they asked me is, so how do we know you're going to be able to bring back more money than the incumbent? I mean, and it's a legitimate question because the towns don't have the money to redo their town square anymore. It's relied on a federal grant.
Well, and the reality is that the government doesn't have the money either. You know,
there's that.
There's 40 trillion reasons why the taxes aren't paying for this government. You know, and we see that all the time. So it is really kind of a bluff. We have an empire, and the emperor has no clothes because he's. But
the problem is the market can't feed back on that because people on the ground don't see it. You know, the towns hire a grant writer, and the grant writer brings in, we just got a $750,000 grant to repave our square. And oh, wow. And so it's kicking the can down the road. The fact that we are in the same amount of debt to GDP as we were after World War II, when we were the only industrial base left to drive our way out of it, we have to come to terms with this because this is a serious thing. And one of the things I mentioned in the book is looking at a way to sunset the federal income tax, but not before there's a specific plan to pay down this debt. We have to take responsibility for that. And every corporation, Apple, all these companies that have made billions of dollars in a safe environment, a regulated environment like they've had, they need to pay some money to try to help get this debt down because they have benefited greatly from the society that our tax dollars have paid for.
I agree. Yeah, they're going to hit a position here where they're not going to be able to service the debt. What I think is likely to happen, and I've talked about this, get your take on this. I think what's likely to happen, and it was several cabinet members in the Trump administration when they began saying, yeah, we've got all these natural resources out there. I think they're just going to basically loot the country and sell this stuff off to cover the debt. There's no way that they're going to be able to get it out of the individuals because we all have a tremendous amount of personal debt as it is.
Yeah, you're right. And that is one way they're going to do it. I am concerned from several elements. I listen to a lot of folks, especially in the oil industry, that the current administration has no clue of the economics of the oil industry or the gas industry.
Or any other economics.
Or any other. They don't understand it. My big concern is due to the erratic behavior of this government over the past 10 years and the mistrust of other actors in the world. I can see us shifting from the dollar being the global currency. And if that happens, the majority of this nation could turn into a third world nation because we're such a debtor nation. Our debt is only fundable if we're the world currency. If we cease being the world currency, the euro takes over, the Chinese currency takes over in the East. we're in a world of hurt, and these guys don't understand that, I'm afraid.
Well,
And
I agree,
so-
and you already see central banks around the world abandoning the dollar and the bonds, treasury bonds, and that type of thing, going for something that is more solid, which is gold. I think that'll become the de facto standard. Whether there's somebody's going to stand up and say, "Well, that's it," I don't think we're going to have another Bretton Woods where you have some kind of a declaration like that. I think it'll gradually evolve, and it is evolving, and it has been evolving over the last several years. I think it was really kicked off by the sanctions that Biden did. They have these tools, these weapons, and sometimes they use them to such a degree that it blows back on them. And I think that was particularly the case with Biden's sanctions. That began a mass exodus away from the dollar. Already people are looking at this and saying, how do they have all this power that they can use the fiat dollar and they don't have any way to pay this off? How did they get that privilege? And then once they started weaponizing it, people said, all right, that's it. We're going to go to a different type of system. What that's going to be is not really clear yet. I think gold will be a big part of it and silver, but it is
this
going
whole
to happen.
Bitcoin thing, I don't understand Bitcoin, and I'd love your take on that, but I don't understand how that works.
Mhm.
And that's kind of, I'm really concerned what that could mean for
I think
overindulgence in that.
My position on that is that I think that it had, at the very beginning, certainly the people who were using it, I don't know who created it. That's another question about it. Was that created as a way to move the Overton window towards a digital currency? Because a digital currency is going to be the absolute way to control everything that we do. And we are seeing not only the central bank digital currencies, but we're also seeing talk about a stable coin. And I think those two things are really going to be a way. They both have the same functions where they can they can immediately confiscate and lock your account remotely if they don't like you or what you do. And so they both have that ability, which is so incredibly dangerous. And so I think that there was perhaps something, some hidden hand behind that, moving it towards that. But again, I'm very leery of anything that is digital like that. And I don't want to put all of, and it's not private. That's the other thing too. I think there's this misconception from people because they talk about cryptocurrencies. The cryptography is not there to protect your identity. As a matter of fact, the Bitcoin ledger is far more visible than anything that's in the current banking system. I've had stories where there was a guy who was a billionaire and all of a sudden he had $900,000 taken out of his account. It was a large transaction. I think it was 900,000. I think it was just below $1 million. Anyway, there's one guy who was looking at what they call whales, right? The large transactions, and this stuck out. And he traced it down, and he was able to connect. This particular guy who was just observing it from the outside was able to contact this guy and say, "Did you know why did this happen? Why did you do this?" Or what? And the guy didn't know it. He'd been scammed, and they'd stolen it out of his account. But this guy could see who he was and see that. Now, you never had that with the banking system. So there's a level of visibility there that even individuals who are not part of the government can see that. What can the government see from all this? And I've already had my restrictions put on me financially as well as speech. So I am very concerned about it. It's not a theory. It is a conspiracy, but it is not a theory that they can shut you down in terms of your speech, your reach, and even your finances. They can shut those types of things down. We've seen people punished and debanked. I was debanked by PayPal. And so, you can have these corporations that are doing the bidding of government. And I think that is one of the key structures that is there. Not only do they treat them as a person, not only do they treat them as an elevated elite person, but they also have given them the ability to do to us whatever they wish, that we would not allow that to be done by another person. If somebody goes in and steals my bank account, I can theoretically get the government to do something about it, but not if it's a corporation and they've got a political agenda. They can do whatever they want to you.
Well, that's the thing that I see Donald Trump as a gift because he is showing us all the flaws in the system. It's like the cancerous tumor is shown up in the body.
Yeah.
And now we know what we need to do to repair it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's enough people in this country that can sit there and say, whether you voted for him or not, or whatever you believe, the most part, everybody knows it's broken. The biggest problem we have is people assuming it's only broken because the other guys are doing it.
That's right.
And that's one of the biggest, hindrances to getting a collective way. And that's why I think the only way for us to get through this right now, and I'm even hesitant in even saying this, is another third party that can wedge in the gap in between the two polarized other parties to give an option and to get the conversation and shaking it up a little bit, because we should be a multi-party system.
I agree.
You know,
then that gets back to how the vote is counted. You know, do you really think as long as we got a first past the post, winner take all system,
never will.
What type of thing do you see happening? Is it going to be some kind of proportional voting or ranked system?
Ranked choice voting. I think there's some really cool creative ways, and there's so many pundits out there that have something against one or the other. But, you know,
the Republicans really hate that ranked voting thing.
Well, because they know what it means.
Exactly.
They know exactly what it means. I have my representative here, that's my local representative in the South Carolina State House, and he just despises the concept of it, but it's the concept of it. I told him, I said, because he had a certain person he wanted to win in the primary for Senate. And I or for the House, there was a House member they were running for, and I told him, if you had ranked choice voting, your person would have won, because he would have been the second choice of the vast majority of all of them, and he would have been able to come up and elevate himself in there. People should have multiple choices. We should also have at-large districts, to where, because that's how the representation used to work when the nation was first founded. It was assumed South Carolina had, I'm just making this up, 5 people. Everybody in the state would vote for 5 people, and it would be general for all the state. Now, I think we're too big to do that now, but there's ways to make it to where everybody's perception is reflected. Right? This whole thing of red and blue states nauseates me, because nobody is solid red. South Carolina is shown as the reddest state, but it's really 60-40. And when you mix red 60 and blue 40, you get purple. It's as purple as you know, any other thing. So we're a big mix that we have to have those people represented.
I agree. And, you know, it was JFK that said, we make peaceful change and possibly make violent revolution inevitable, I think is the quote that he had. But that, whether or not I quoted him correctly, that is the reality. And we have this calcified system of corruption that is really going to make things difficult. And I think the role of Donald Trump has been designed to be an accelerator, and he certainly has accelerated things. And unfortunately, he has set, I call him precedent Trump, because he has set a lot of very bad precedents.
I'm going to borrow that. Thank you. I love that.
He set all these bad precedents, and we talk about it, and it's like, well, what's going to happen when the Democrats are going to get? Oh, they're never going to get in. We're going to control the government forever. Many of the Republican supporters of Trump will say that. You have to look at this from a broader perspective and understand that if you put something in here right now, you may think that it's a win. You may think that you're owning the libs, but you may be setting up a structure here that is going to be used to as a fight against you, and it's going to be a horrific situation. So that always needs to be in the back of people's minds. And I really do think that I'm a big proponent of Strauss and Howe's fourth turning. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
No.
But they're the guys who came up with the label of millennial. You know, where do we come up with this kind of stuff and the generation X, Y, and Z and stuff like that? They looked at American and British history and went back. First, they did one called Generations, and then they did the fourth turning, and they looked at American and British history going back 500 years because they were synchronized. And they saw that once every 4 generations, there would be a major change. And they looked at these different generations throughout this long period of time. They said, well, right after there's a major change, the people who went through that, usually it's a war and things like that, the people who went through it, they have a very different perspective, and their kids react to that differently. And then the kids, that third generation that's there, they also come up under different circumstances, but there was a certain commonality to that kept repeating. And so our fourth turnings, we had the American Revolution was one, then we had the Civil War, then we had World War II and the Great Depression. As they pointed out, all of these changes always have a major economic component to them, and usually it involves a war. And so they said in the early 1990s, they said somewhere around the mid-2000s, there'll be a great economic disruption, and that'll kick off the fourth turning. And it'll probably conclude sometime around 2029. And you notice that these people who always talk about millennials, they never talk about 2030, except when they're talking about their dreams of having sustainable development goals out of the UN. 2030 is really big with smart cities and all these other things. And so I think we're right up against that. I think they realize that there is a certain rhythm to history and to different generations, and they're going to exploit that. And I think that's part of what this acceleration is really about.
Oh, and that you hit the nail on the head. I haven't used those terms, like you said, from those theorists, but I see that. I see that in history, the cycling, the founders, and you see it in people who own companies, right? The founder of a company, his children do a pretty good job. The grandchildren are the ones that have to sell off assets to keep up their lifestyle. And so we see that happening in America, and with the differences in how people are educated, the lack of our education system, and extracting out the sense of history and civic education. I see that every day now when I discuss things, and I talk to people that come instinctively to me when I talk about the Supreme Court and how it works. It's like speaking Spanish to these people because they have no foundational understanding of how our government is even supposed to work. And so that's the reckoning we have to have. And what I promised my brand new little grandson, he didn't understand me. He was born a month ago. But I looked in that little child's face and I said, I will not sit down with you when you're 20 years old and say I did nothing. Because when he's 20 years old, he's going to see things that are going to ask me, why didn't you people stop this, or whatever it is?
I agree.
And what I'm going to say, here's what I did, and here's what I tried.
Good for you.
And
it's not just the book, Reviving Our Republic, but it's also the website, revivingourrepublic.com, your podcast, same name with that. And tell us a little bit about the app that you're working on.
Well, and this is the first time I've talked about it publicly. We've created an app, and we should be launching within the next month, especially once Apple approves the app for the platform. But this is a method in which somebody could go in and plug in an executive order, plug in a politician's platform or a law, and it will rate it on constitutionality, not whether it's left, conservative, liberal, whatever. All those are made up words that are corrupted anyway now. But whether it's constitutional, and we have filled into the algorithm every major Supreme Court case with all the challenges and everything embedded into this app, as well as the Federalist Papers and Washington's Farewell Address. So what I hope it to do is, if you plug this stuff in, it'll give a rating score. And you could also take platforms of politicians. And I think what will surprise most people is, there'll be Democrats running and there'll be Republicans running, and you take their platforms, you're going to see more constitutionality on things, because people are so stuck in the sphere of whether they're conservative or liberal versus what's really constitutional.
Yeah.
Because that's the ultimate conservatism, is the rule of law. And also it'll give a chance for people, politicians who are running, to have a page on this site, and they can take the test on the Reviving Our Republic score. And I have 40 policy points. And if they pick 30 policy points that they agree with, they'll have 100 ROR score. So it'll be a way for people to judge what they see, how it actually applies to the Constitution. And there's not another app like it. We're really proud of it. So we're going to launch that. And if you buy a annual subscription, the normal subscription, it's a lot of free stuff. It's a free element to it that you have limited access. But if you get a subscription, it's only $4 a month. If you get an annual, you'll get the whole book downloaded, the book and the audio book. So we're really excited about that and pushing it. And I'm hoping for a national tour. We're going to go around and try to share that. So
that's great. Yeah, I'm all for anything that we can have that gives us a little bit of insight into what these politicians are doing. Many of them refuse to answer the questionnaires that are out there, for obvious reasons. That ought to be an immediately fail. You just refuse to participate. You're not going to participate in the constitutional governance of things either, right?
Right. Well, you have things out there like the Heritage Foundation has, the conservative score. But it's all ideological talking points. They think conservatism is believing we should go and bomb any country we want.
Yeah,
They
I agree.
actually think that's being conservative, and they don't understand that's the most liberal thing that has come out of this national trajectory, is to think we can just drop bombs anywhere we want and think that's what makes America great.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the most dangerous thing that we've gotten into.
I agree. When we look at it, when Trump was joking, oh, I'm just joking, I'm just going to be a dictator. But actually, he turned into one when you look at what he did with tariffs. And I call them tariff tantrums. He wakes up, he doesn't like this leader because he said something at a meeting somewhere. So now he's going to throw the tariffs at that country. There's nothing tactical or strategic about it. There's nothing that makes any economic sense about it. It is simply about him throwing something at people that he doesn't like. And that's one of the reasons why we don't want to have one person making that type of decision. And then he doubles down on it and he does the war basically just on his own personal preferences without any oversight, without having any declaration or debate about any of this stuff. It's just unilateral decisions, and he's got a political party that rubber stamps everything that he does. It's truly amazing.
As long as he can platform the demonization of who he is opposing, whether it be those crazies in Canada or anti-American people in Canada or the evil Muslims in Iran, as long as he can platform that enemy, he's getting support for it. And it's probably the most dangerous thing. What we've done in Iran is probably one of the most strategic miscalculations this nation has ever done.
Oh, I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Yes.
It's horrible. I was in Russia in 1990, and I saw firsthand eating with Russians while Gorbachev was still in power. And I was there all summer living with people in their homes from Leningrad all the way down to Yalta. And I saw in the eyes and ears and hugs of these people who embraced me the positive outcome of détente and reaching out as friends and not bombing Moscow to get what we wanted.
That's right.
And we've missed that opportunity with Iran. We had that opportunity. We have set back. We have so empowered the Revolutionary Guard now. They're going to be entrenched there for another 2 generations.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They talk about, 47 years, this and that. And of course, that's not where our history began, right? Our history began by overthrowing their government with a coup and putting in the Shah of Iran. And so, that's really the true history. And they were figuring out that, hey, we don't like these Ayatollahs. We want to have something different. Then we come in and start bombing the civilian population. They run to the Ayatollahs for help. And so they have solidified that regime that they claim that was one of their objectives. And then when you look at the nuclear stuff, what they're doing is we're seeing now with Saudi Arabia, nuclear proliferation, because all the Arab countries understand that they need to have nuclear weapons in order to be left alone. And so everybody's going to be trying to get it, not just Iran. And of course, Iran is going to be doubling down on their efforts to get nuclear weapons, but we're going to help Saudi Arabia to get nuclear weapons. And who knows where this all ends.
Well, the thing is, Iran wanted a nuclear weapon for one reason. This whole myth that they were going to start throwing nuclear weapons at people is just the stupidest, most ill-informed concept. They wanted nuclear weapons so they wouldn't be bombed, so they wouldn't be attacked. And this has given them the reason to double down on it. So what just happened in the past 2 days? Iran bombed the largest Saudi oil refinery. I mean, they have destroyed this thing, and it will affect markets huge. But why did they do that? So who is Iran's main enemy in the region? It's Saudi Arabia. What does our president do? Tell Saudi Arabia you can have a weapon.
Yeah, I know. It's
and all of a sudden
insane.
Iran can't. It's amateur hour with these guys.
Yeah, you look at this and it's almost like, is this stupidity or is it deliberate? When you look at what is happening, certainly this, when we talk about a fourth turning, the entire world now is synchronized because of communications and all the rest of the stuff. It's not just America and Great Britain. And so we're all on this same cycle. And I think that it's necessary for them to have a major global economic crisis and a major global war in order for them to institute the next step of consolidation, and that is a global consolidation of governance. I think this is all by design, quite frankly.
Well, it is. I don't think it has to work. I
Mhm.
look at these people doing this the same way I looked at Khrushchev banging his shoe on the podium. We will bury, it's like, who cares what he said? I mean, history showed what really happened.
Mhm.
And as long as we empower good people with loving intention that has faith in their fellow citizens, which I think we have a lot more of them out there than is shown in polls,
Mhm.
we can get through this.
Mhm.
But we're going to go through some hard times, especially with what's going on. The slippery slope of what's happening in the Middle East now is the most worrisome, because I've asked people, ask me, what do you think is going to be next? I honestly have no idea, but I don't think it's going to be good.
I agree. Well, Mike, thank you so much. Mike Biedenbaugh. And again, Reviving Our Republic, the app, the website, and the book. You find all those things out there. And I think it's very important. I really do appreciate what you're doing. All we can do at this point in time, we do what we can. There's no way that we're going to be able to get a voice in terms of elections and things like that. But what we can do is we can point to what the system should be. That's why I talk about the Constitution. Certainly the Constitution is dead, but it is a wonderful plan and a blueprint. Yes, it needs to have some more guardrails in it, as you pointed out at the very beginning, and George Washington understood that, and the founders understood that. It's a human document. It's never going to be perfect, and it's never going to be self-actuating. We're going to have people who understand the importance of keeping individual liberty and freedom, who are going to stand in its defense. And so that's what you're trying to do, and I really do appreciate that. It looks like a great educational resource, and I would highly recommend it. I haven't read through the entire book, but I got pretty far through it to know that we're on the same page. So thank you so much. Appreciate that, Mike.
Well, David, thank you for allowing me on your platform and sharing this with everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good luck, and good luck with the app. We certainly need your help. Thank you.
You got it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.